Welcome back. Tonight, we drift through the sleepy streets of ancient Greece. So wherever you are, however your day has been, you have nothing to do now but rest. There are no twists tonight, nothing to follow, nothing you need to remember in the morning. A city of white marble and olive groves, growing still beneath the cooling dusk. We'll drift slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere at all. If these journeys help you rest, you're welcome to follow along, but only if you'd like to. And if you're listening now, leave the name of your city and the time where you are. Wherever you're listening from, you're in good company tonight. So let yourself settle. Let your shoulders soften, and let your eyes close whenever they're ready. Breathe in slowly, and let it go. There's no need to stay awake for any of this. Just let the streets of ancient Greece come to you. The shape of this ancient world begins with the land itself. You can see it in the steep mountain ranges, deep valleys cut through the stone. These high peaks physically isolated early communities. Overland travel was incredibly difficult. A journey of a few miles could take days. Because of this, each valley grew up alone. They developed their own distinct laws. They spoke their own local dialects. They formed fierce, independent identities. The fragmented nature of these city-states was not a choice. It was born directly from the rugged landscape. People learned to rely only on their closest neighbors. They built their lives around the specific soil they had. The mountains acted as massive stone walls. They kept strangers out and kept local customs safe. You can still feel that deep sense of local pride today. The geography forced them to look inward. It made every small town feel like its own entire world. Long before the classical era, early kings looked for safety. They found it on a highly specific rocky outcrop. This was the fortress of Mycenae. They did not choose this high ground for its beauty. They chose it for absolute visual control. The elevated stone sits above the fertile Argive plain. From up here, guards could see for miles in every direction. They could monitor every trade route winding through the valley. They could spot any approaching army long before it arrived. The massive stone walls seemed to grow right out of the mountain. The builders used stones so large they look impossible to move. This high perch gave them total command over the land below. The kings could watch the harvest and track the merchants. The steep climb made surprise attacks nearly impossible. The fortress simply watched over the quiet fields. It was a perfect, silent sentinel guarding the wealth of the valley. Down in the valleys, a quiet shift changed everything. For centuries, only the very wealthy could afford bronze armor. This gave a small elite total control over warfare. But then, iron was discovered and put to use. Iron was cheap and incredibly abundant in the earth. ordinary farmers could suddenly afford to make their own weapons. You can imagine the glow of small forge fires at night. Blacksmiths hammered out simple, strong iron spearheads. This new metal broke the military monopoly of the rich kings. When common people could defend themselves, they demanded a voice. They wanted a say in how their towns were run. This simple shift in materials laid the groundwork for early democracy. The power moved from the palaces down to the fields. A farmer with an iron spear was now a citizen soldier. The whole structure of society shifted. It all started with the heat of a simple iron forge. Over on the Attic Peninsula, a different kind of change happened. Athens did not start out as a massive power. It grew from a minor town through a slow, quiet process. Dozens of small, independent villages were scattered across the rolling hills. They were connected only by winding dirt paths through the olive trees. Over time, these scattered communities made a rare choice. They voluntarily surrendered their local governments. They agreed to form a single, unified state centered on the main city. This process was called Sinuousism. It was a peaceful merging of hearths and homes. The villagers did not have to move their houses. They simply changed how they saw themselves. They became citizens of a much larger idea. The evening fires still burned in the same small valleys. But now, they all belonged to one shared community. This quiet political shift turned a modest town into a regional giant. While others built high walls, one famous city took a different path. Sparta chose to settle in a wide, open river valley. The Eurotas River flows gently through the flat, green land. The towering mountains stand far in the background. Unlike its rivals, this town never built massive defensive walls. The leaders believed that stone fortifications made men soft. They claimed that a wall of brave men was the only defense needed. Because of this, the town looked surprisingly modest. There were no grand gates or towering stone towers. It was just a sprawling village of simple mud-brick homes. The houses sat quietly among the agricultural fields. Visitors were often shocked by how plain it looked. It did not look like the center of a fierce military power. It just looked like a peaceful farming town. The true strength of the place was entirely invisible. It lived only in the people themselves. Further north, another city found power through a structural gamble. Thebes briefly became the most dominant force in the region. They did this by completely reinventing how men fought on foot. For generations, armies lined up in long, even rows. But at the Battle of Leuctra, the Thebans tried something radical. They stacked their left flank an astonishing 50 men deep. You can picture the massive, dense block of bronze shields. They stood in absolute silence on the dusty field. This deep formation was heavy and incredibly powerful. It was designed to smash right through the traditional enemy lines. The gamble worked perfectly. It shattered the previously invincible Spartan army in a single day. This one tactical choice changed the balance of power overnight. The dense block of men moved like a slow, unstoppable wave. It was a triumph of pure geometry. A simple change in shape rewrote the map of the ancient world. Back near the coast, a lucky strike changed history again. Athens only became a naval superpower because of a sudden discovery. A massive vein of silver was found deep in the hills of Laurion. The dark mine shafts cut far into the rocky earth. The raw, glittering ore was brought up by the cartload. Normally, this sudden wealth would be handed out to the citizens. But a leader named Themistocles had a different vision. He convinced the people to spend every single coin on ships. They used the silver to build a fleet of 200 triremes. The shipyards filled with the sound of cutting wood and hammering bronze. This massive fleet was built just in time. It would soon save the city from a massive foreign invasion. The wealth of the dark earth was turned into power on the water. A lucky strike in the dirt built an empire of the sea. That new fleet could not save the city itself from burning. The Persians eventually marched in and destroyed the original town. They burned the temples on the high rocky plateau to the ground. But this terrible destruction actually created a blank slate. The iconic, pristine marble monuments we know today only exist because of that fire. The flames cleared the old, crowded foundations away completely. Decades later, a leader named Pericles saw an opportunity. He was able to completely reimagine the sacred space. He ordered the construction of the Parthenon and other grand temples. The new buildings rose above the charred stones of the past. The pristine white marble caught the golden evening light. If the old city had never burned, the new one could never have been built. The most famous skyline in the ancient world was born from ashes. The fire gave them the space to dream on a massive scale. That beautiful new skyline soon took on a darker meaning. The city cemented its transformation from a friendly ally into a strict empire. This shift happened on a very specific day. The leaders decided to move the shared treasury of the Delian League. The heavy wooden chests of silver had been kept on a neutral island. Now, they were carried up the steep stone steps of the high plateau. Men hauled the bronze-bound boxes by torchlight. Placing the money in the new temples changed everything. It effectively turned voluntary Allied contributions into forced tribute. The beautiful marble columns were now funded by the wealth of other towns. The sacred space became a massive, glowing bank vault. The Allies realized they were no longer equal partners. They were now subjects, paying for another city's glory. The gleaming temples looked stunning from the sea. But to the Allies, they became a symbol of lost freedom. To protect this new wealth, the city made a radical architectural gamble. They built the long walls to connect the inland center to the coast. Two towering parallel stone walls stretched for miles across the quiet plain. They created a safe, enclosed corridor all the way to the harbor. By doing this, the city effectively turned itself into an artificial island. As long as they controlled the sea, they could never be starved out. Enemy armies could burn the farms outside the walls. But grain ships could still sail into the port and unload food. The long dirt road between the walls was always busy. Carts rolled safely back and forth under the moonlight. It was a brilliant piece of defensive engineering. The walls ignored the traditional rules of land warfare. They tied the fate of the city entirely to the water. The stone corridor became their permanent lifeline to the outside world. At the end of those long walls sat the port of Piraeus. It was once just a chaotic, muddy harbor with scattered docks. But it was transformed into a highly organized naval base. An architect named Hippodamus introduced a brand new concept here. He brought the idea of strict urban zoning to the waterfront. He separated commercial, public and private spaces into a rigid grid. The dirt streets were laid out in perfectly straight, intersecting lines. Uniform stone storehouses lined the water. Massive ship sheds held the wooden triremes out of the sun. Everything had a specific place and a logical order. You could easily find the market, the docks, or the homes. The calm, deep blue harbor was now ringed by perfect geometry. This grid plan made the busy port run like a quiet machine. It was a masterpiece of civic planning. The messy waterfront became a model of clean, rational design. Not all roads were built for trade or war. The Sacred Way was a special path connecting the main city to Eleusis. It was one of the few roads in the region to be carefully paved. The builders deliberately widened the stone surface. They designed it specifically to handle massive, slow-moving crowds. Every year, thousands of people walked this route for a mystery cult procession. The smooth stones made the long journey easier for the faithful. Small stone shrines lined the edges of the winding path. You can imagine the quiet footsteps of the crowd under the moonlight. The road passed through rocky landscapes, dotted with old olive trees. It was built for ritual, not for speed. The wide paving stones allowed people to walk side by side in thought. The physical road was shaped by the spiritual needs of the walkers. It guided them gently toward the distant sanctuary by the sea. Some sacred sites were chosen by the earth itself. The sanctuary of Delphi was built high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. It sits exactly where two deep geological fault lines intersect. This was not a random choice by the early priests. The deep fissures in the rocky floor released a sweet-smelling gas. This ethylene vapor drifted up into the quiet, dim temple. The natural gas induced the trance-like states of the famous oracle. She would sit above the crack in the stone and breathe it in. The flickering light of bronze braziers caught the faint, ethereal mist. People came from all over the world to hear her speak. They thought the voice of a god was rising from the dirt. But it was the deep chemistry of the earth shaping human history. The fault lines created a natural window into the unknown. The landscape literally breathed its secrets into the dark room. Other cities found their fortune by mastering the land. Corinth became one of the wealthiest places in the ancient world. They did this simply by exploiting a narrow strip of earth. They built a paved limestone trackway straight across the isthmus. This path was called the Diolkos. Deep grooves were worn into the stone to guide wooden carts. Merchants could actually drag their heavy ships entirely overland. This saved them from the long, treacherous sea journey around the southern cape. You can picture a wooden ship rolling slowly through the grassy fields. The setting sun cast long shadows across the paved track. This shortcut saved weeks of travel and avoided deadly storms. The city charged a heavy toll for this safe passage. They grew incredibly rich, just by offering a dry path between two seas. The stone grooves are still there today. They are quiet reminders of a brilliant, simple idea. Far across the water, another group of Corinthians took a massive risk. They were seeking relief from severe drought and overpopulation at home. They sailed west and gambled on a distant natural harbor in Sicily. This new settlement became Syracuse. It grew into the most powerful city on the island. Their gamble paid off because of one incredible stroke of luck. The harbor happened to possess a rare, abundant freshwater spring. This crystal-clear water bubbled up right on the salty shoreline. It flowed into a carved limestone basin, just feet from the sea waves. Ships could sail right up to the edge and fill their barrels. Having fresh water directly on a deep harbor was a perfect combination. It allowed the town to grow rapidly, without fear of thirst. The gentle sound of the spring, mixed with the ocean tide. That single source of fresh water built an entire Western empire. Sometimes, a new city is born purely out of desperation. The town of Massalia, which is modern-day Marseille, started this way. It was founded by Greek refugees, fleeing from the advancing Persian army. They lived in Phocaea, and they knew they could not win. So they packed their entire population onto wooden ships. they left their homes behind and sailed far across the Mediterranean. They arrived on a rugged, unfamiliar coast at misty dawn. They pulled their ships up onto a pristine sandy beach. They began building simple wooden shelters near the dark tree line. The campfires offered a small comfort in a strange new world. They had to start completely over on a foreign shore. But they brought their culture, their language, and their hopes with them. This desperate escape planted a permanent seed on the distant coast. The refugees turned a lonely beach into a thriving, lasting home. Back on the mainland, another population was forced to move. A coastal group had to relocate inland, and they built Olympus. They constructed this new town with astonishing speed and uniformity. The result is a perfect time capsule of classical urban planning. They laid out rows of identical, square stone houses. The homes shared common walls to save building materials and time. Every house had a central open courtyard and a terracotta tiled roof. The perfectly gridded neighborhood cast long, uniform shadows in the late afternoon. It looks incredibly modern from above. There were no grand palaces, just block after block of equal homes. The grid made the rapid construction possible. It also reflected a sense of shared community among the displaced people. They all started over together in identical spaces. The strict geometry of the streets brought order to their sudden upheaval. It was a fast, practical solution to a sudden crisis. Sometimes, a city was built just to be a wall. The massive settlement of Megalopolis was artificially created in a matter of months. A coalition of leaders wanted to block Spartan expansion to the north. So they forced the residents of 40 surrounding villages to relocate. They moved everyone into this massive new space in the wide plain. The town was designed simply to act as a permanent, physical roadblock. You can imagine the freshly cut stone defensive walls going up. Wooden scaffolding still clung to the half-finished public buildings. The people did not choose to live here. They were placed here like stones on a game board. The sprawling town sat quietly in the strategic valley. It was a city born from military strategy, not organic growth. The residents had to learn how to live together in a forced home. The giant walls stood ready to catch an army that might never come. On the island of Rhodes, a merger happened for a different reason. 3 rival, ancient cities shared the island for centuries. But they slowly realized they were losing valuable trade to the mainland. To survive, they made a very practical business decision. They agreed to merge and build a brand new capital city from scratch. They designed a state-of-the-art harbor with pristine limestone moles. Grand uniform stone stores lined the beautiful new waterfront. Ships rested quietly at anchor in the calm, deep water. The early morning light caught the fresh, clean masonry. By combining their wealth, they created a dominant maritime power. The new city was perfectly positioned to control the eastern trade routes. They put aside their old rivalries to build something much larger. The beautiful new port was a masterpiece of shared ambition. It proves that sometimes, starting over together is the only way to move forward. Not all ancient towns survived to see the classical age. The Minoan settlement of Akrotiri was lost long before Athens rose. It was perfectly preserved for millennia because of a catastrophic event. A massive volcanic eruption buried the entire island in thick ash. The white dust fell gently like snow in the twilight. It filled the empty, narrow stone streets. It covered the multi-story mud brick houses and their wooden balconies. The ash froze the vibrant wall frescoes exactly as they were. The people had already fled, leaving their beautiful homes behind. The eruption was so violent, it reshaped the entire Mediterranean coastline. But under the ground, the town simply went to sleep. The thick blanket of ash kept the colors bright, and the walls standing. It is a quiet, haunting snapshot of a lost world. The disaster destroyed the island, but it saved the memory of the town forever. Another wealthy city vanished even faster, swallowed by the sea. The town of Helike disappeared overnight in a terrifying natural disaster. A massive earthquake suddenly liquefied the ground beneath the streets. This was followed immediately by a towering tsunami from the Gulf. The rushing water dragged the entire city down into the dark sea. The stone columns and tiled roofs sank into the sandy seabed. For centuries, the ruins remained clearly visible underwater. Fishermen could look down and see the sunken temples. Shafts of sunlight pierced the blue water, illuminating the quiet, drowned streets. The town went from a bustling center to a silent reef in hours. It is a haunting reminder of how fragile these coastal towns were. The sea simply took back the land it had loaned to the people. The underwater ruins rested peacefully, far below the gentle waves. The city became a ghost story told by passing sailors. Sometimes, nature destroys a city very slowly, over many centuries. The great port of Miletus was strangled by the river that fed it. The Meander River carried heavy silt down from the distant mountains. Year after year, it deposited this mud into the busy harbor. Slowly, the coastline began to advance outward. The shallow, muddy marshland filled with tall, quiet reeds. The once bustling stone docks were left stranded miles inland. You can still see the ancient mooring rings sitting next to dry grass. The open sea is now barely visible in the far distance. The city did not fall to an army or an earthquake. It simply lost its connection to the water. The merchants had to leave when the ships could no longer reach them. The beautiful sunset now reflects off mud instead of deep water. The river built new land, and in doing so, it quietly erased a maritime empire. A similar slow tragedy forced another famous city to keep moving. The people of Ephesus had to physically relocate multiple times. The Casta River continuously silted up their beautiful harbor. As the mud built up, the water grew too shallow for trade ships. The citizens had to abandon their homes and build again further west. They did this just to stay connected to the vital sea. You can find the crumbling stone foundations of the older neighborhoods. They are now completely overgrown with thick marsh grass. In the twilight, the ruins look melancholic and peaceful. In the distance, the lights of the newer, active harbor glowed against the water. The city was always chasing the retreating coastline. They refused to give up their identity as a port town. They left a trail of abandoned streets behind them in the mud. The river kept pushing them, and they just kept walking toward the waves. As the classical world expanded, new cities were planned with incredible care. Alexandria was designed to work perfectly with the local climate. The architect Dinocrates used a strict grid plan for the new streets. He specifically aligned the wide avenues to catch the cool Etesian winds. These gentle breezes blew in directly from the Mediterranean Sea. The straight roads acted like wind tunnels, pulling the cool air inland. It created a natural air conditioning system for the entire metropolis. The sea breeze rustled the leaves of the planted palm trees. The white limestone buildings stayed comfortable, even in the hot summer sun. The city was built to breathe, with the rhythm of the ocean. It was a brilliant marriage of urban design and natural weather. The grid did not just organize the houses. It actively made life better for everyone walking the streets. The wind itself became a permanent part of the architecture. This era saw a major shift away from slow, organic city growth. Kings now had the wealth to build massive new capitals from scratch. A ruler named Seleucus built the giant city of Antioch this way. He used vast fortunes to instantly create a sprawling metropolis. It featured impossibly wide colonnaded streets and massive stone aqueducts. Grand palaces rose up in a matter of years, not centuries. These new cities completely dwarfed the older traditional towns of the past. The scale was far larger than anything seen in classical times. The sweeping sunset views showed a city built by royal decree. It did not grow village by village over hundreds of years. It was stamped onto the earth, fully formed. The sheer size of the place was meant to inspire awe. It marked the end of the small, independent city-state. The world was now ruled by giant cities and endless ambition. High on the rocky hill of the Acropolis in Athens, the Parthenon catches the early morning light. You might assume this massive marble temple is built with perfectly straight lines. But if you look closely at the wide stone steps, you will notice a gentle curve. The ancient architects knew a secret about human sight. Perfectly flat floors and straight columns tend to look heavy. They can appear to sag in the middle, under their own weight. To fix this optical illusion, the builders intentionally curved the floor upward in the center. They also made the tall columns swell slightly in the middle. There is almost no straight line in the entire building. Every block was carved with a slight, careful angle. The result is a structure that feels light and alive. It seems to lift itself up into the blue sky. The stone breathes with a quiet, hidden geometry. Just steps away from those curved columns, the massive marble blocks hold another quiet secret. The builders did not use any mortar to keep these heavy stones together. Instead, they carved small grooves into the top of each block. They shaped these grooves like little boaties. Then, they dropped iron clamps into the spaces to lock the stones tight. But iron has a flaw. When it gets wet, it rusts. Rust makes the metal expand. That expansion would easily crack the beautiful white marble over time. To stop this, the workers did something clever. They melted lead over hot fires. They carefully poured the liquid metal into the carved holes. The soft lead wrapped completely around the iron clamps. It sealed the metal away from the damp air forever. The lead cooled and hardened into a dull gray shell. It kept the iron safe, and the marble perfectly whole. On the north side of the same hill stands a much stranger building. The Erechtheion does not look like a normal temple. It has a bizarre, uneven shape with different roof levels. It looks as if several small buildings were pushed together. The architects did not want it to look this way. They had no choice. They had to build around sacred things that were already there. The ground held anomalies they could not disturb. In one spot, a specific ancient olive tree grew from the rocky dirt. In another spot, there was a deep hole in the bare bedrock. People believed this hole was the exact mark left by the sea god's trident. The builders had to design the walls and porches to protect these exact spots. They wrapped the marble around the tree and the sacred marks. The strange shape is just a map of old beliefs. Down in the lower city, the Hephaestion sits quietly on a small green hill. It is one of the best preserved temples in the ancient world. But the ground right next to it holds a different kind of history. Archaeologists digging in the dirt found hidden, clay-lined pits. These deep holes were not for storage. They were temporary workshops. Long ago, Workers used these pits to cast massive bronze statues. They built giant terracotta molds right in the earth. Then they poured glowing, liquid bronze down into the dark pits. The earth helped support the heavy molds while the hot metal cooled. They made the statues right next to the temple. This way, they did not have to move the heavy bronze very far. Once the metal was hard, they hoisted the finished statues up into place. The pits were filled in and forgotten for thousands of years. Just below that temple spreads the wide, flat space of the Athenian agora. This was the busy heart of the city. It was a place for markets, courts, and daily life. But the edges of this bustling square were strictly marked. If you walked along the dirt paths, you would see small stone pillars. These unassuming markers were called heroi. They were simple weathered rectangles set deep into the ground. They drew an invisible line across the city. Crossing past these stones meant you were entering a sacred civic space. The rules changed the moment you stepped past them. Anyone who had committed a serious crime was legally barred from entering. People who avoided their military service were also kept out. The stones did not need walls or gates to work. The simple carved letters on the rock were enough to keep the boundaries safe and respected. Hidden beneath the busy surface of that same marketplace was a clever piece of engineering. The city needed a way to keep time during long public events. Sundials worked well on bright days, but they were useless when it rained. So they built a clepsydra, a highly accurate water clock. It was hidden in a deep, dark stone shaft underground. The masonry walls were cool and damp. Workers would let water slowly drip into the deep cylindrical chamber. As the water level rose, it hit bronze measurement markers set into the wet stone. Officials used this rising water to time important court speeches. They used it to keep public debates fair and equal. Even on the cloudiest winter days, the water kept perfect time. The slow, steady drip in the dark underground room measured out the busy lives of the people walking in the square above. On the eastern edge of the square stands a massive, two-story building. This long-covered colonnade is the Stoa of Attalos. It was essentially the ancient world's very first shopping mall. The building stretches out with a deep, shaded porch. Rows of fluted columns hold up a heavy wooden roof. Behind the columns, the back wall is lined with dozens of small, individual rooms. These were open-fronted shops. Merchants would set up their goods on wooden tables. The deep shade kept the hot summer sun off the customers. The solid roof kept the winter rain away. It was a perfect, weatherproof space. People did not just come here to buy things. Philosophers would gather in the cool shadows to talk and debate. Friends would meet to walk up and down the long stone floors. It was a place to see the city and be seen by others. A short walk away, tucked into a narrow street, stands a very small structure. The monument of Lycrates is elegant and cylindrical. It looks like a tiny, round marble tower. It was built to celebrate a winning choir in a local festival. But this small monument marks a major turning point in architecture. If you look up at the top of its columns, you will see something special. The stone is carved into deep, intricate shapes of acanthus leaves. This is the Corinthian style. Before this monument was built, these leafy capitals were only ever used inside buildings. They were kept hidden in the dark rooms of temples. This small tower is the very first time the ornate style was used on the outside of a building. The carved leaves finally saw the sunlight. From this quiet street, that leafy design spread across the entire ancient world. Beneath these ancient streets runs a hidden network of water. The Pisistrated aqueduct supplied the growing city with fresh water from the hills. It was not a grand stone bridge like the ones built later. Instead, it was a quiet, underground system of thick terracotta pipes. The clay tubes were carefully shaped to interlock perfectly. They formed a long, sealed line through the dark earth. But the engineers knew that pipes sometimes get clogged with dirt or roots. Digging up the whole street to find a block would be a disaster. So they designed a clever solution. Every single pipe featured a small, oval-shaped access hole on its top. These holes were sealed with clay lids. If the water stopped flowing, workers could just open a few lids to find the problem. They could clear the blockage easily, leaving the rest of the hidden system perfectly undisturbed. A few miles away, the city meets the sea at the port of Piraeus. The water in Zia harbor is calm and dark at twilight. Today, modern boats bob gently at their moorings. But beneath the modern waters lie massive, sunken stone foundations. These are the heavy moles of the ancient naval bases. Long ago, these underwater rocks supported huge, enclosed ship sheds. The sheds had long, sloping stone ramps that led directly down into the water. Sleek wooden warships would be pulled up these ramps to dry out. Thick wooden roofs covered the ramps, held up by rows of stone pillars. The entire Athenian fleet was housed in these dark, fortified garages. The sheds protected the expensive ships from the hot sun and winter storms. Now the wooden roofs are gone. The stone ramps slip quietly down into the deep water, hiding beneath the gentle waves. Near those sunken ramps once stood a massive naval storehouse. The arsenal of Philo was a highly complex building. It held all the ropes, sails and rigging for the great warships. The building was completely destroyed centuries ago. Not a single stone of its walls remains standing today. Yet, we know exactly what it looked like. We know its exact dimensions, down to the inch. We know exactly where every window was placed. We even know the exact thickness of the wooden roof beams. We know all of this because of a single piece of rock. The architect's incredibly detailed blueprint was not drawn on fragile paper. It was carved entirely into a large, flat, marble slab. The dense, precise Greek letters spelled out every measurement of the massive building. The building itself vanished into dust, but the heavy stone instructions survived to tell its exact story. Further down the coast, the Temple of Poseidon stands on a high cliff at Sunion. The wind blows hard off the sea, wrapping around the tall marble columns. These columns are made of several heavy, round stone drums, stacked on top of each other. The seams between the drums are nearly invisible. To get them to line up so perfectly, the builders used a clever trick called impolia. They carved a perfect square hole into the center of each stone drum. Then, they inserted a thick wooden peg into the hole. When they lowered the next heavy drum on top, the wooden peg connected them. The peg acted like an axle. It allowed the workers to spin the massive upper stone. They would grind the heavy stones together until the surfaces matched perfectly. The wood stayed hidden inside the rock, holding the tall columns steady against the sea wind. Inland from the coast, the town of Eleusis holds a very different kind of structure. The Telesterion broke all the normal rules of architecture. Most temples were built as beautiful rectangles, meant to be admired from the outside. They had grand porches and bright sculptures. The Telesterion was the exact opposite. It was a colossal, windowless square hall. It was built to hide things, not to show them off. Inside, the massive room was filled with a dense forest of thick stone columns. The columns were spaced closely together, disappearing into the deep shadows. This dark, heavy space was designed for a secret mystery cult. The initiates would gather inside to watch hidden rituals. The thick walls and lack of windows kept the mysteries completely safe from the outside world. The building was a giant stone box, designed to hold secrets in the flickering light of distant torches. Far to the south, the ancient citadel of Mycenae sits on a rugged hill. The entrance to this fortress is the famous Lion Gate. The walls are made of Cyclopean masonry, using stones so large that people later thought giants built them. The massive stone lintel resting right above the gateway weighs over 20 tons. That is a dangerous amount of weight to hang over an empty doorway. The builders knew the heavy wall above could easily crack the lintel in half. To prevent this, they created a clever structural trick called a relieving triangle. They left a large empty triangular space in the heavy wall right above the doorway. This gap pushed the crushing weight of the wall out to the sides, away from the center. Then, they filled the empty triangle with a thin, light slab of stone. They carved two beautiful facing lions into it. Just down the road from that gate is a massive underground tomb. The treasury of Atreus is built into the side of a quiet hill. When you walk inside, you find yourself in a colossal, beehive-shaped room. The ceiling is a soaring stone dome. But this dome was built entirely without a keystone. There is no central block locking an arch together. Instead, the builders used a technique called corbelled vaulting. They laid massive, rough-hewn stones in wide, flat rings. Each new ring of stones was pushed slightly further inward than the one below it. The walls slowly step closer and closer together as they rise into the dark air. Finally, the rings meet at the very top, closed by a single flat capstone. The heavy stones are held in place only by their own massive weight. The quiet, dark room feels like the inside of a mountain. Across the mountains, the theatre of Epidaurus rests in a peaceful green valley. This massive semicircular stone theatre is famous for its sound. A person standing on the circular dirt stage can whisper, and someone in the highest row will hear it. It seems like pure magic, but it is actually brilliant engineering. The secret is in the limestone seats. The builders cut the stone benches at very specific, sharp angles. These angled cuts act as sophisticated acoustic filters. When a large crowd gathers, they make a low-frequency background noise. They shuffle their feet and murmur. The angled limestone traps and dampens those low, rumbling sounds. At the same time, the hard stone reflects and amplifies the high frequencies of the actors' voices. The theatre itself cleans the sound. It strips away the noise of the crowd and carries the clear words up into the quiet evening air. Further west, the rugged landscape is guarded by the ruins of Messene. The defensive walls here are among the most massive ever built in the ancient world. They stretch for miles across the quiet, rocky valleys. The walls feature colossal, circular stone towers that rise multiple stories into the sky. These towers were not just tall lookout posts. They were highly specialized military machines. The builders designed them specifically to handle a terrifying new invention. Torsion catapults had just been created, and they changed how wars were fought. The towers were built with narrow, perfectly square windows. These windows were measured and cut to give the heavy artillery the perfect angle to fire. The thick stone floors were reinforced to handle the violent recoil of the machines. The entire fortification was shaped around the brutal math of flying rocks and heavy wooden gears. To the north, the sanctuary of Olympia was home to the massive temple of Zeus. This building was so large that its roof created a serious engineering problem. A standard roof made of terracotta clay tiles would have been too weak. The massive span required something much stronger. So the architects made a bold choice. They carved the heavy roof tiles entirely out of solid pentelic marble. The massive, perfectly interlocking stone tiles were incredibly heavy. But the builders cut the marble surprisingly thin. They carved it down until the white stone was almost fragile. Because the marble was so thin, it became slightly translucent. During the day, the harsh sun would hit the roof. The thin stone would catch the rays and let a soft, glowing light filter down into the dark attic. The heavy stone roof actually helped illuminate the quiet spaces hidden just below it. High in the mountains, the Temple of Apollo at Delphi clings to a steep slope. This was the home of the famous oracle. People traveled from all over the world to ask questions here. But the main hall of the temple hid a secret space. Beneath the polished floor was a sunken, labyrinthine basement level called the Adyton. This restricted subterranean room was completely hidden from the petitioners waiting above. The air down there was cool and thick with faint smoke. This dark chamber was where the priestess, the Pythia, actually sat. She rested on a bronze tripod near a natural fissure in the rock. The people upstairs could hear her voice echoing up from the stones, but they could never see her. The architecture kept her isolated in the dark earth. The sunken room turned a human woman into a mysterious voice rising from the deep ground. Out in the Saronic Gulf, the Temple of Aphaea stands on the island of Aegina. Today, its columns are a beautiful, weathered gray. We are used to seeing ancient cities as a sea of pristine, bare stone. But that is a trick of time. When this temple was first built, it was not bare at all. The stone was painted in garish, shockingly vibrant colors. The builders used thick mineral pigments to cover the marble. They painted the carved warriors with deep crimson armor. They used bright lapis lazuli blue for the backgrounds. They added shining gold leaf to the bronze weapons. The building was a riot of bright, opaque color, shining in the sun. Over the centuries, the wind and rain slowly washed the paint away. The bright reds and blues faded into the dirt. The clean white ruins we see today are just the washed bones of a colorful past. Further south on the island of Crete, the Minoan Palace at Knossos is a sprawling maze. The building is massive, with hundreds of rooms stacked on top of each other. The lowest basement levels are deep underground, far away from the outside walls. These deep rooms should have been pitch black and suffocating. But the builders invented a complex system of light wells to solve the problem. They cut deep, vertical square shafts, straight down, through multiple stories of the stone building. These open shafts acted like giant chimneys for sunlight and fresh air. A brilliant beam of midday sun could travel all the way down to the lowest stone floor. The shafts were painted with vibrant red columns to reflect the glow. The cool sea breeze would drop down into the dark labyrinth. The clever architecture pulled the bright sky right down into the deep earth. On the island of Samos, a different kind of tunnel cuts through the dark rock. The Eupalinian aqueduct is a marvel of ancient geometry. The city needed fresh water, but a solid limestone mountain stood in the way. The engineers decided to dig a tunnel straight through the mountain. To save time, they started digging from both sides simultaneously. They had no compasses, and no modern surveying tools. They only had basic math and careful measurements. For years, two teams chipped away at the dark, claustrophobic bedrock. They moved slowly through the solid stone, hoping their math was right. Deep inside the mountain, the two narrow corridors finally met. The jagged point where they connected was off by only a few feet. It was an incredible feat of precision. The water flowed perfectly through the dark rock, guided by nothing but careful thought and simple geometry. Across the water in Asia Minor, the Temple of Apollo at Didyma hid a massive architectural secret. From the outside, it looked like a normal, giant temple surrounded by tall columns. But if you walked through the front doors, you would not find a standard interior room with a roof. Instead, you would face a giant, solid wall. The massive walls concealed a pair of dark, vaulted, tunnel-like staircases. These steep, narrow stone steps led sharply downward. You had to walk down into the dark, enclosed stone tunnels. At the bottom, the tunnel suddenly opened up into a hidden open-air courtyard. The center of the temple was completely hollow and open to the sky. This hidden, sunken courtyard was where the oracle spoke. The building was designed to disorient you. It pulled you down into the dark before releasing you into the bright, hidden heart of the sanctuary. Further up the coast, the city of Pergamon was built on a hill so incredibly steep, it seemed impossible to settle. The slopes were sharp and dizzying. Standard architectural designs simply would not fit on this rugged terrain. When it came time to build a theater, the engineers had to adapt. They could not build a wide, gentle bowl, like the ones in other cities. Instead, they built the steepest theater in the ancient world. They carved a narrow, dramatic wedge of stone, seating directly into the sheer cliff face. The tiers of seats are so steep they feel like a stone waterfall spilling down the mountain. Sitting in the upper rows feels like floating in the air. You look past the stage and see a vast hazy valley dropping away far below. The builders turned a difficult, dangerous cliff into a breathtaking place to sit and listen. Across the Mediterranean Sea, the Pharos of Alexandria stood on the edge of Egypt. This massive stone lighthouse guided ships safely into the busy harbor. It was one of the tallest buildings in the world. At the very top, a massive roaring fire burned in a bronze brazier every night. But a simple fire was not bright enough to cut through the thick sea fog. The engineers needed to make the light stronger. They utilized a massive, highly polished bronze mirror. They positioned this giant curved metal dish right behind the flames. The polished bronze caught the wild light of the fire and focused it into a single, intense beam. The mirror pushed the light far out, over the dark water. The glowing beam was visible to ships up to 30 miles away. The clever metal mirror turned a simple wood fire into a guiding star. The daily rhythm of Athens began just as the sun crested the hills. It did not start with a bell. It began with a sound you could feel in the dirt streets. Down in the agora, merchants arrived in the cool morning air. They carried hundreds of folded wicker stalls. The loud, rhythmic clattering echoed across the wide plaza. Men unfolded woven tables one by one. They raised heavy canvas tents to block the coming heat. You can almost hear the wood snapping into place. The city woke up to this steady, wooden beat. It was a practical kind of music. The market was a vast, dusty stage. Every morning, the same players set up the same scenes. They moved with practiced ease. The light was still soft and blue. The air smelled of dry earth and old wood. Soon, the crowds would arrive. But for now, there was only the clatter of the stalls. Once the stalls were up, a new rhythm took over. The fish market operated on a strict and frantic clock. There was no ice to keep the catch cold. The morning haul had to sell fast. When the boats docked, a merchant rang a loud bronze handbell. That sharp chime cut through the low hum of the plaza. It was a signal that changed the pace of the morning. Citizens would drop whatever they were doing. They sprinted toward the wet marble slabs. Everyone wanted the freshest fish from the sea. The scene was a sudden burst of energy. Silver scales gleamed in the early light. The smell of salt water filled the air. Buyers pointed and bargained in loud voices. Then, just as quickly, the rush would end. The best fish were gone. The bell went quiet. The market settled back into its slow, dusty crawl. Away from the frantic market, a quieter morning routine unfolded. The public fountain house was the true social center for women. They gathered at the Eniakrounos as the sun climbed higher. Cool water poured steadily from bronze lion head spouts. The sound of splashing water filled the stone room. Women brought heavy, three-handled ceramic jugs called hydrii. They waited their turn in the damp shade. This was a rare chance to talk freely. They shared the news of the day while the jugs filled. The wet clay felt cool against their hands. Once full, the vessels were incredibly heavy. The women lifted them with practiced grace. They balanced the painted jugs perfectly on their heads. Then they began the slow walk back home. Their steps were careful and measured. The water sloshed softly with each stride. It was a daily chore, but also a vital moment of connection. On the slopes above the city, another group practiced in the dawnlight. The great stone theater of Dionysus sat empty and still. Long before any audience arrived, the space echoed with sound. 15 men moved across the circular dirt stage. They stepped in perfect synchronized time. This was the chorus, preparing for the festival. They did not just sing. They moved as a single breathing unit. A lone musician sat near the edge of the circle. He played a wooden double reed pipe. The sharp, reedy notes set the pace for their feet. The men chanted to the steady rhythm of the pipe. Their voices bounced off the curved stone seats. The air was cool, and the shadows were long. They repeated the same steps over and over. The dirt grew packed and smooth beneath their bare feet. It was a quiet, focused kind of work. The real performance was still hours away. Back inside the city walls, the morning smelled of wood smoke. Baking bread was a daily, portable chore in most homes. Women did not use large fixed brick ovens. Instead, they relied on a clever clay tool. It was a bell-shaped cover called a klibanos. First, they heated the heavy terracotta dome, right in the hearth fire. The clay absorbed the intense heat of the flames. Then, they placed flat rounds of dough on the swept stone floor. They lifted the glowing hot cover with thick cloths. They set it directly over the raw dough. The trapped, radiant heat baked the bread perfectly. It was a small, contained oven that could move anywhere. The smell of toasted grain filled the small rooms. When they lifted the lid, steam rushed out into the air. The flatbreads were warm, crusty, and ready for the day. It was a simple, perfect design. Every meal in these homes began with a quiet pause. The central hearth was more than just a place to cook. It was the sacred heart of the house. Before anyone ate, they performed a small domestic ritual. Someone would take a tiny portion of the food. It might be a piece of barley cake. Sometimes it was just a splash of dark wine. They tossed this offering directly into the low, glowing embers. The fire would hiss and flare for a brief second. This was a gift to Hestia, the goddess of the home. It was not a grand, public display of faith. It was a private, daily habit. The smell of burnt barley lingered in the room. It reminded everyone that the home was a protected space. Only after the fire took its share did the family eat. The rhythm of the meal could finally begin. Throughout the day, a steady wooden beat echoed through the house. This was the soundtrack of the women's quarters. In the shaded rooms of the gynecium, the loom was always working. Women spent countless hours weaving clothing for their families. The tall, warp-weighted loom leaned heavily against the plaster wall. Dozens of vertical threads hung down toward the floor. Small conical clay weights kept these threads perfectly taut. As the weaver worked, the wooden parts clacked together. The clay weights chimed softly when they bumped. It was a hypnotic, repetitive sound. You could hear it from the street outside. The work required immense patience and skill. Patterns slowly emerged in the dyed wool. The rhythm of the loom marked the passing of the hours. It was a constant, comforting noise. The house felt empty and wrong if the loom was ever silent. Some weaving projects were far more than daily chores. The grandest festival in the city culminated in a massive textile. For 9 long months, a select group of young women worked in total seclusion. They lived together near the sacred temples. Their only task was to weave a giant woolen garment. This was the peplos, dyed a vibrant, glowing saffron yellow. The loom they used was incredibly tall and wide. They worked the heavy threads day after day. The room smelled of lanolin and rich yellow dye. It was a quiet, holy act of creation. When the 9 months ended, the fabric was finally cut down. It was carried through the streets in a massive, joyful parade. The bright cloth was draped over an ancient wooden statue of Athena. The entire city celebrated this moment. But it all started with those quiet months of steady, rhythmic weaving. As the seasons turned, the daily chores shifted to survival. Autumn brought a sticky, urgent rhythm to the countryside. Families had to preserve their harvest before the cold arrived. They spent days working in the warm, fading sun. Flat woven baskets covered the courtyards. Hundreds of fresh figs were laid out to dry. The sweet, heavy scent of drying fruit filled the air. Nearby, others sorted the olive harvest. They packed the green and black fruit into large clay amphorae. They filled the tall jars with salty brine or sharp vinegar. This liquid would keep the olives safe through the winter. Your hands would be coated in salt and sticky juice by noon. It was messy, repetitive work. But it was also deeply satisfying. Every sealed jar meant food for the dark months ahead. The courtyard slowly filled with these pointed clay vessels. the winter pantry was finally secure. The end of the harvest season brought a much louder rhythm. The grape crush was a joyous, messy community event. Families gathered around large, shallow stone vats in the fields. They dumped baskets of ripe grapes into the center. Then, they climbed in with bare feet. The floor of the vat was slick and dangerous. To keep their balance, the workers linked their arms tightly together. They moved in a circle, stomping to a shared beat. Sometimes someone played a pipe to keep the time. The dark purple juice splashed up their legs. Their skin would be stained for weeks afterward. The sweet smell of crushed grapes and wild yeast was overpowering. Fresh juice flowed steadily from a stone spout into waiting jars. It was exhausting work, but it felt like a party. The rhythm of their feet turned the fruit into the year's new wine. Far to the south, a very different kind of meal took place. The daily life of a Spartan man revolved around strict routine. Every citizen had to eat in a communal mess hall. This mandatory gathering was called the cicadas. They sat on hard wooden benches at long, plain tables. There was no luxury here, only shared discipline. They ate together every single day, without exception. The staple dish was a notoriously bitter soup. It was known simply as black broth. The recipe was harsh and unforgiving. It was made of boiled pork, coarse salt, sharp vinegar, and animal blood. The dark liquid looked thick and uninviting. Outsiders who tasted it said they finally understood why Spartans did not fear death. But to the men at the table, it was the taste of unity. They ate in quiet solidarity. The broth bound them together as equals. In other cities, men gathered to feed their minds instead. The famous Lyceum was not a building filled with quiet desks. It was a place defined by the rhythm of walking. Philosophers and students met in the shaded outdoor colonnades. They did not sit still to listen to lectures. Instead, they paced back and forth along the stone paths. They believed that moving the body helped move the mind. Small groups walked slowly under the trees. They discussed complex ideas about nature, ethics, and the stars. The soft scuff of leather sandals on stone was constant. When a debate grew heated, the walking might speed up. When a thought was deep, the pace would slow down. The physical rhythm of their steps matched the flow of their thoughts. You could track a good argument by the footprints in the dust. Learning was an active, restless pursuit. Even reading a book was a physical, noisy act. In the great libraries of the ancient world, silence was rare. The vast halls of Alexandria hummed with a constant, low murmur. scholars sat on wooden stools with long papyrus scrolls. Ancient Greek text was written without any spaces between the words. It was just a solid block of letters. To understand it, you had to sound it out. Readers quietly mouthed the words to themselves. They let their ears find the breaks in the sentences. The room sounded like a hive of gentle bees. Hundreds of men whispered different texts at the same time. The dry papyrus rustled as they unrolled the next section. The smell of dust and ink hung in the warm air. Reading was not a silent retreat into the mind. It was a vocal performance, meant for an audience of one. Physical perfection required its own careful rituals. Before a foot race began, the great stadium at Olympia fell completely silent. Thousands of spectators watched from the grassy banks. Down on the track, officials performed a meticulous task. They walked along the starting line with wide wooden brooms. They carefully swept the loose sand perfectly smooth. Every grain had to be level and fair. The starting line was marked by long, grooved stone blocks. The runners would grip these grooves with their bare toes. The swept sand ensured no one had a hidden advantage. The officials worked with slow, deliberate strokes. The soft scratching of the brooms echoed in the quiet air. The runners stood waiting, their muscles tense and ready. They watched the sand settle into a flawless surface. Only when the ground was perfect did the race begin. The silence broke with the sudden slap of running feet. After the exercise was over, the cleanup was just as precise. The end of an athlete's workout involved a meticulous scraping ritual. They did not just jump into a pool of water. Their bodies were covered in a thick, stubborn grime. It was a heavy mixture of sweat, track dust and olive oil. To remove it, they used a curved bronze tool. This scraper was called a strigil. The athlete would sit on a stone bench in the courtyard of the palestra. He pressed the dull metal edge against his skin. He pulled it slowly down his arms and legs. The bronze scraped away the thick layer of dirt and oil. It made a soft, satisfying sound against the skin. The courtyard smelled of warm oil and dusty bodies. They cleaned themselves with slow, methodical strokes. Only after the scraping was finished would they finally bathe in cool water. Down at the harbor, departures had their own solemn rhythm. No wooden ship left the docks without a proper send-off. The sea was dangerous, and the gods needed to be honored. Before the ropes were untied, the crew gathered on the deck. They stood together and sang a rhythmic hymn. This song was called a paean. It was a deep, musical prayer to Apollo or Poseidon. Their voices carried over the calm morning water. While they sang, the captain stepped to the edge of the ship. He held a clay cup, filled with dark, unmixed wine. He poured the liquid directly into the green sea. The wine bloomed like a dark cloud in the water. It was a gift to buy safe passage through the waves. The singing stopped. The crew took their places at the oars. The ship finally slipped away from the safety of the shore. Once out on the open water, speed depended entirely on sound. The terrifying power of a warship relied on perfect rhythm. Deep inside the wooden hull, the air was hot and stale. 170 rowers sat crammed together on wooden benches. They could not see the water or the enemy. They pulled their heavy oars in blind, trusting unison. To keep them together, a single musician sat above them. He played a sharp, piercing tune on a double flute. The reedy notes cut through the creaking of the ship. The rowers matched their strokes to the music. If the tempo sped up, they pulled harder. If the music slowed, they eased their pace. The flute was the heartbeat of the massive ship. Without it, the oars would tangle and crash. The wooden hull vibrated with the steady, driving beat of the music and the men. Far inland, people sought answers from a much quieter source. At the ancient oracle of Dodona, the rituals were peaceful. The priests here did not read animal entrails. They did not breathe strange gases from the earth. Instead, they relied on the wind. The sanctuary was built around a massive sacred oak tree. The priests sat on stones beneath its sprawling branches. They closed their eyes and waited in absolute silence. They listened intently to the rustling of the dry leaves. When the wind blew, the branches swayed and whispered. The priests believed this sound was the actual voice of Zeus. They interpreted the gentle noise to answer people's questions. It was a religion based on deep, patient listening. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. You had to be perfectly still to hear the gods speak. The answers came in the softest breeze. When people fell ill, they visited sanctuaries filled with eerie gratitude. The healing temples of Asclepius were quiet, hopeful places. Patients would sleep in the sanctuary, waiting for a curing dream. When someone was healed, they left a very specific thank you. They commissioned small, lifelike terracotta models of their cured body parts. If a foot was healed, they bought a clay foot. If their sight returned, they offered clay eyes. They hung these small sculptures on the stone walls of the temple. Over time, the walls became covered in these floating limbs. Dozens of hands, ears and legs dangled from wooden pegs. In the dim light of the oil lamps, It looked strange, but it was a beautiful record of pain leaving the body. The room was a silent chorus of thanks. Every clay piece was a story of someone who walked away whole. When healing failed, the city shifted into a rhythm of grief. Mourning was not a quiet, private affair. It was a highly visible, physical display. During a funeral procession, the family walked slowly toward the cemetery. The women wore coarse, scratchy black garments. They cut their hair painfully short, to show their loss. As they walked, they beat their chests in a synchronized rhythm. The dull thud of their hands matched their slow steps. They sang high-pitched, wailing dirges into the open air. The sad, sharp notes echoed down the narrow dirt streets. Everyone who heard the song knew a neighbor was gone. The grief was loud, structured, and shared by the community. The procession moved like a dark river through the bright city. It was a heavy, exhausting ritual. But the shared rhythm helped carry the weight of the loss. As the day finally ended, a new scent drifted through the streets. Dusk brought the quiet ritual of lighting the lamps. There were no street lights to push back the dark. Every home had to create its own small glow. People filled dozens of small terracotta lamps with olive oil. They floated a tiny wick in the center and lit it. The flames were small, but they multiplied quickly. As thousands of lamps caught fire, the air grew heavy. The entire city began to smell faintly of burning oil and warm clay. It was a thick, comforting scent that meant the day was done. The golden light flickered against the rough plaster walls. Shadows danced in the corners of the rooms. The city grew quiet as the darkness settled in. The sharp edges of the buildings softened in the warm, oily glow. Night had officially arrived. In the wealthier homes, the evening was just getting started. The dining room fell quiet for a very crucial ritual. Before a symposium could begin, the wine had to be prepared. The host stood beside a large, beautifully painted ceramic bowl. This was the crater, the centerpiece of the night. He poured thick, syrupy dark wine into the vessel. Then, he carefully mixed it with clear, cool water. Drinking unmixed wine was considered dangerous and barbaric. It was believed to cause madness and chaos. The host had to find the perfect balance. Too much water made it weak. Too much wine made the guests foolish. He stirred the dark red liquid slowly. The guests watched in respectful silence. The clinking of the pitcher against the bowl was the only sound. Once the mixture was right, the first cups were poured. The night of conversation could finally begin. Outside in the dark streets, a much faster ritual took place. The night was sometimes broken by a thrilling relay race. This was the lampadidromia, a frantic run through the shadows. Teams of young men lined up in the dark. They did not pass a simple wooden baton. They passed a blazing open torch. The runners sprinted down the narrow, uneven dirt roads. They had to move as fast as possible, but they also had to keep the flame alive. If the wind blew the fire out, the team lost. The runners held the torches high to protect the fire. The orange light bounced wildly off the stone walls. Onlookers cheered from the dark doorways as the fire rushed past. The smell of burning pitch trailed behind the runners. It was a beautiful, dangerous dance with the wind. The winning flame finally lit the sacred altar. Some nighttime journeys were far more solemn and strange. The Eleusinian mysteries required a grueling, nocturnal rhythm. Thousands of initiates gathered in the dead of night. They walked 14 miles down the sacred way. The dirt roads stretched from the city all the way to Eleusis. The crowd moved together in the pitch black. They carried tied bundles of leafy myrtle branches. Hundreds of handheld torches provided the only light. The warm, flickering glow illuminated the tired faces of the walkers. As they marched, they chanted rhythmically into the dark. The steady sound of their voices kept their feet moving. The air was cold, and the walk was exhausting. But the shared rhythm gave them strength. They were walking toward a secret they swore never to reveal. The long line of fire looked like a glowing snake in the hills. The night felt endless and holy. While the city slept, the walls were kept safe by sound. The night watch operated on a quiet, acoustic rhythm. The guards stood alone in the dark on the high stone walls. It was easy to fall asleep in the cool night breeze. To prevent this, a patrol officer walked the long perimeter. He carried a small, faintly gleaming bronze bell. As he approached each post, he rang the bell once. The sharp chime cut through the silent night. The guard on duty had to answer the sound immediately. He would call out or strike his spear against the stone. If a guard did not answer, the officer knew he was asleep. The bell moved slowly around the sleeping city. It was a gentle, metallic heartbeat in the dark. The citizens rested safely below. They knew the bell was keeping the watchers awake until the dawn. When you walk through the ancient streets of Athens, you notice quiet guardians at every corner. These are the herms. They are simple, square stone pillars. Each one is topped with the carved head of the god Hermes. They stand at crossroads and mark the doorways of homes. The city feels vast, but these markers bring a sense of scale and safety. People do not just walk past them. They treat these stones with deep respect. A traveler might pause in the late afternoon sun. They might leave a small offering of fresh figs on the stone ledge. Sometimes, you can see the faint sheen of olive oil. Someone has anointed the pillar to ask for safe passage. The dust of the road settles around the base. The carved eyes watch the street grow quiet. It is a small, daily rhythm of faith. The city relies on these silent watchers to keep the boundaries secure. If you follow a resident home, you will see a strange ritual at the front door. An ancient Greek key looks nothing like the small brass objects we use today. It is a large, heavy bronze hook. The shape looks more like a farmer's sickle. Some of these keys are over a foot long. They are heavy and cold to the touch. To unlock a door, you cannot just turn a simple cylinder. You must pass this massive hook through a specific hole in the thick wood. Then, you reach blindly into the dark space inside. You have to catch a hidden wooden bolt with the tip of the bronze hook. Once you feel it catch, you slide the heavy bar across. It takes practice and a steady hand. The metal scrapes softly against the wood. It is a slow, deliberate way to enter a house. The heavy clunk of the bolt means you are finally safe inside. Inside the home, the passage of time is marked by water. The Hellenistic world credits the philosopher Plato with a very clever invention. He built what might be the first alarm clock. It is not a ticking machine of gears and springs. Instead, it is a tall, elegant water clock. It uses the steady drip of water to measure the night. The device has a sealed air chamber hidden inside. As water slowly fills the lower vessel, it pushes the trapped air upward. The air has nowhere to go but through a small, narrow pipe at the top. When the water reaches a precise level, the forced air makes a loud noise. It sounds just like a whistling tea kettle. The sharp sound cuts through the quiet morning air. It wakes the students at the academy before the sun rises. The soft splashing of water turns into a sudden, bright call to begin the day. As the morning warms up, a different kind of sound fills the rooms. The people here love the loud, buzzing song of cicadas. They do not just listen to them in the wild trees. They actually keep these large insects as beloved house pets. You can see tiny, intricate cages hanging from the wooden ceiling beams. People weave these little homes out of dried reeds or thin twigs. The craftsmanship is delicate and careful. Inside each small cage sits a single green cicada. The summer heat makes the insect sing its rhythmic, vibrating song. The sound echoes softly against the plaster walls. It brings the feeling of the wild countryside right into the center of the house. People sit quietly and listen to the buzzing. It is a comforting, familiar noise. The song of the cicada is the true soundtrack of a long, hot summer day. It makes the heavy afternoon air feel a little lighter. There is another, much softer pet that shares these quiet courtyards. Wealthy families are completely obsessed with a specific breed of dog. They are called Melatians. These are tiny, fluffy lap dogs with long, silky hair. They are a stark contrast to the fierce hunting hounds kept by farmers. These little dogs live lives of pure luxury. Owners pamper them constantly and feed them rich scraps from the table. When people walk through the market, they often carry these dogs. They tuck the tiny animals safely into the warm folds of their woolen cloaks. The dogs peek out at the busy streets from their cozy hiding spots. The bond between owner and pet is surprisingly deep. When a Melatian dog dies, the family mourns it like a person. They even carve elaborate marble tombstones for them. You can find these small, beautiful markers in quiet gardens. They feature touching inscriptions that remember a tiny, loyal friend. Out in the sunlit squares, human relationships follow their own strange rules. If someone throws an apple at you, it is not an insult. It is actually a highly specific, formal declaration of love. The bright red fruit is a symbol of romance and beauty. A person might stand across a dusty courtyard and toss an apple to someone they admire. The fruit arcs through the warm air. The moment it lands is full of tension. If the other person catches the apple, the message is clear. Catching it means they accept the romantic advance. It is a quiet, playful way to start a courtship. There are no loud words or grand speeches needed. The simple weight of the fruit in a hand says everything. You can imagine the soft thud of an apple caught against a linen dress. It is a fleeting, beautiful moment. A whole future can begin with a single, perfect toss. Not all local customs are so sweet and romantic. The city has strict rules about its most valuable crops. The word sycophant means something very different here than it does today. Originally, it translated to revealer of figs. It describes a highly specific type of petty crime. The region produces incredible, sacred figs that are highly prized. Smuggling these fruits out of the area is strictly illegal. But some people try to sneak baskets of them past the city gates at dusk. A sycophant is a neighbor who watches from the shadows. They wait for someone to hide the fruit under a rough cloak. Then, they inform the guards to get a reward. It is a culture of quiet spying and petty betrayal. The sweet smell of ripe figs becomes a source of tension. You have to watch your back in the market. Even a simple basket of fruit can turn a neighbor into a bitter enemy. The rules protecting the olive trees are even more severe. The olive tree is deeply sacred to the entire region of Attica. There are specific, holy trees scattered across the rocky landscape. These are called the moriai. A low, circular stone wall protects each of these ancient, gnarled trees. The law guards them with absolute zero tolerance. You cannot uproot or cut down one of these specific trees. It does not matter if the tree grows right in the middle of your own private land. If you harm a sacred olive tree, the punishment is permanent exile. You will lose your home and your city forever. The silver leaves shimmer in the hot wind. The thick, twisted trunks hold centuries of history. People walk carefully around them. The trees are treated like living monuments. They belong to the gods, not to the farmers. The deep roots tie the people to the land and to their strict laws. Exile is a common tool for keeping the peace in this society. Citizens can actually vote to kick a dangerous politician out of town. They do this by scratching the person's name onto a broken piece of pottery. These rough clay shards are called ostraca. It seems like a pure, democratic process. But human nature always finds a way to cheat. Archaeologists dug up a fascinating cache of nearly 200 of these ballots. Every single one bore the name of a leader named Themistocles. But when experts looked closely, they noticed something strange. All 200 names were written by just 14 distinct hands. Political operatives clearly sat in a room and prepared batches of fake ballots. They handed these pre-written shards out to lazy or illiterate voters. The warm sunlight hits the scratched letters on the clay. It is a quiet reminder that political tricks are as old as democracy itself. To fight this kind of corruption, the courts rely on heavy machinery. They invented a massive stone randomization device called the cleroterium. It is designed to prevent anyone from tampering with a jury. The machine is a tall, flat slab of rock, carved with dozens of horizontal slots. In the early morning, citizens line up in the dusty square. They insert their small bronze identification tickets into the narrow slots. Beside the slots is a long vertical tube filled with marbles. The official releases the marbles one by one. A black marble means the row of men goes home. A white marble means that row will serve on the jury today. The clatter of stone against stone echoes in the quiet air. It is a completely blind, mechanical choice. No bribes or whispers can change the outcome. The heavy stone machine stands as a monument to fairness. It takes the power of choice away from flawed men. The pursuit of justice goes far beyond human crimes. The legal system is so thorough that it even judges inanimate objects. There is a specific, quiet courtyard, called the Prytaneum. This court is dedicated entirely to putting lifeless things on trial. Imagine a heavy wooden beam falls from a roof and kills a passing worker. The city does not just clean up the mess and move on. Bearded magistrates gather in their heavy cloaks, They stand around the piece of wood and hold a formal trial. They speak serious words and weigh the evidence against the timber. If the object is found guilty, it faces a strict penalty. The guards ceremonially carry the wood or stone to the city border. They throw it into exile, casting it out of their pure space. It feels strange to us now, but it brings a deep sense of order to a chaotic world. Every tragedy must have a clear answer. When the official courts fail, people turn to darker methods. Petty disputes are often handled in the shadows of the Keramakos cemetery. People use curse tablets known as deficciones to settle their bitter grudges. A person takes a thin, soft sheet of dull grey lead. They use a sharp tool to scratch their anger into the metal. The tiny letters spell out curses against a rival merchant or a cheating lover. Then, they fold the lead sheet up tightly. To seal the magic, they drive a rusty iron nail straight through the center. In the dead of night, they bury the tablet in a fresh grave. They believe the dead will carry the message down to the underworld. The cold dirt covers the heavy metal. It is a silent, secret way to seek revenge. The folded lead rests in the dark earth for centuries. It holds on to the quiet fury of a forgotten argument. Arguments often start over games of chance in the dim taverns. The most common dice in this world are not neat, carved cubes. Instead, gamblers use the knuckle bones of sheep or goats. These smooth, polished bones are called astragoloi. You can hear them rattling in a leather cup before they hit the rough wooden table. Because of their natural, irregular shape, they only have 4 distinct resting sides. Each side is assigned a different numerical value for betting. The warm light of an oil lamp casts long shadows over the scattered bones. Men lean in close to see how the pieces have landed. The smooth surface of the bone feels cool in the hand. It is a simple game born from the leftovers of a shepherd's dinner. But fortunes change hands based on how these little bones tumble. The clatter of the astragoloi is the steady heartbeat of the late-night tavern. Drinking in these taverns comes with its own hidden dangers. On the island of Samos, a clever inventor created a very punitive drinking vessel. It is known as the Pythagorean cup. From the outside, it looks like a perfectly normal, painted ceramic bowl. You can pour dark wine into it and drink without any trouble. But there is a hidden, curved column inside the center of the bowl. It is designed to punish greed. If you pour your wine past a specific, hidden line, a siphon mechanism activates. The pressure shifts in an instant. The entire contents of the cup drain straight down through a hole in the bottom. The dark wine spills all over your lap in a sudden rush. It is a practical joke with a moral lesson. The tavern erupts in quiet laughter at the greedy drinker. The empty cup sits on the wet table. It is a masterpiece of hidden engineering. While some cities joke about greed, others try to outlaw it entirely. Down in Sparta, the leaders banned gold and silver coins completely. They wanted to discourage hoarding and keep everyone on an equal level. Instead of shiny coins, their currency consists of massive heavy iron spits. These long, rusted metal rods are called obols. They are incredibly cumbersome and rough to the touch. You cannot just slip your wealth into a small leather pouch. If you want to make a major purchase, you need serious help. It takes a heavy wooden ox cart just to carry a moderate amount of money. The iron clanks loudly as the cart rolls over the dirt roads. The sheer weight of the money makes secret bribes almost impossible. Wealth becomes a physical burden. The heavy iron spits rust slowly in the damp air. It is a harsh, practical solution to the problem of human greed. The Spartans apply this same harsh logic to their military secrets. Their commanders communicate using one of the world's earliest cryptographic devices. It is a simple but brilliant tool called the skytail. A general takes a long, narrow strip of pale leather. He wraps it tightly around a smooth wooden cylinder of a highly specific thickness. Then, he writes his secret message in neat rows across the coils. When he unwinds the leather, the letters break apart. The strip just looks like a meaningless string of random characters. A messenger carries this loose leather band across enemy lines. The message can only be read by someone holding a wooden staff of the exact same size. When the leather is wrapped around the matching stick, the letters align perfectly again. The dim light of a command tent illuminates the hidden words. It is a quiet, elegant way to hide the truth in plain sight. Even with secret codes, these generals rarely make a move alone. They always look to the sky before marching into battle. They practice a highly specific ritual called augury. This is the art of predicting the future by watching the birds. A priest in a white cloak stands on a high rocky outcrop at dawn. He watches the flight patterns of dark birds, circling against the pale sky. He listens closely to their sharp cries. He even studies how they feed on the ground. The army believes these birds are direct messengers from the gods. The entire camp waits in total silence for the priest to speak. The wind rustles the dry grass. If the birds fly to the right, the army will march with confidence. If they fly to the left, the generals might delay the attack. The fate of thousands of men rests on the flutter of a wing. When the army finally marches, they must carry their fire with them. Moving a live flame over long distances is a difficult challenge. The soldiers use the thick hollow stalks of the giant fennel plant. They cut the green stalks and hollow out the center. The inside of the plant is lined with a soft, white pith. They drop a glowing red-hot ember deep inside the tube. The pith smolders very slowly, keeping the fire alive for hours. The outside of the stalk stays cool to the touch. A soldier can carry it safely as he walks through the hills. When they make camp, they just blow on the ember to start a new blaze. This clever trick is deeply rooted in their stories. It is why the old myths say Prometheus used a fennel stalk to steal fire from the gods. The tiny, hidden spark travels safely through the dark night. The stories of these marches are carved into stone for the future, but early writing here looks very strange to modern eyes. The text does not just flow neatly from left to right. They use an ancient style called boustrophiedon. The word literally means, as the ox plows. You read the first line from left to right. Then, the text drops down and reverses direction. You read the second line from right to left. Even the carved letters themselves are flipped backward on the return trip. The eye sweeps back and forth across the weathered stone slab. It mimics the steady, rhythmic path of a farmer plowing a field. The raking light of the sun catches the deep grooves in the rock. It is a slow, deliberate way to read. The words fold back on themselves over and over. The stone holds the memory of a time when writing was still a new magic. Some of these early writers left their mark far from home. Greek mercenaries traveled across the sea to fight in Egypt. While they were there, they left behind some of the world's most famous ancient graffiti. They stood before the colossal stone statues of Ramses II at Abu Simbel. The soldiers used their daggers to carve their names deeply into the smooth stone legs. They proudly wrote down their hometowns in rough, archaic letters. The bright Egyptian sun beats down on the massive monuments. The tiny Greek letters look like small scratches on the giant legs. But they are a permanent record of a long, exhausting journey. These men wanted to prove they had seen the edges of the world. The stone holds their names, long after their battles are forgotten. It is a quiet, human urge to leave a mark. The dust blows across the desert, but the names remain clear. The ships that carried these men across the sea were terrifying. A Greek warship is not just a wooden machine. The sailors treat the vessel as a living, breathing entity. The wooden prow of every trireme is painted with large, striking eyes. The colors are vibrant shades of blue, white and black. The paint stares out over the calm harbor water. This practice is meant to give the ship the power of sight. The sailors believe the painted eyes help the ship navigate the treacherous waves. They think the ship can spot hidden rocks and enemy fleets on its own. The massive wooden ram rests just below the waterline. The painted eyes give the ship a fierce, watchful personality. As the oars dip into the sea, the ship seems to wake up. It glides out of the harbor like a giant sea creature. The sailors trust the eyes to guide them home. Deep inside the hulls of the merchant ships, space is tightly managed. The iconic, pointed base of the clay amphora is not a design flaw. It is actually a piece of highly specific engineering. These heavy clay jars carry wine and olive oil across the rough sea. If they had flat bottoms, they would slide and shatter during a storm. Instead, the pointed bases allow the jars to be stacked in interlocking layers. They fit perfectly into the curved wooden hull of the ship. The point of one jar wedges securely into the gap between the jars below it. The dark, cramped hold is packed tight with hundreds of these vessels. They do not roll or shift when the waves crash against the wood. The ship rocks violently, but the cargo stays perfectly still. It is a brilliant, simple solution to a dangerous problem. The clay jars rest safely in the dark. Navigating these cargo ships requires incredible skill and secret tools. The Antiquity mechanism is a mind-boggling anomaly from the ancient world. It is a shoebox-sized device made of interlocking precision-cut bronze gears. It functions as a complex analog computer. A sailor can turn a small dial on the side of the wooden case. The internal gears spin and calculate the exact positions of the planets. The machine can even predict solar and lunar eclipses years in advance. A shaft of sunlight illuminates the intricate bronze dials on the ship's table. This level of technology will not appear again in Europe for many centuries. It sits quietly in the captain's cabin, holding the secrets of the night sky. The metal teeth mesh together with perfect, silent grace. It is a tiny, mechanical model of the entire universe. The ship sails forward, guided by the slow turning of the bronze wheels. Beneath the ships, men dive into the dark water for a different harvest. Sponge divers use a terrifyingly simple tool called a scandula petra. It is just a heavy, flat, teardrop-shaped piece of marble. The stone is tied securely to a thick hemp rope. A diver takes a deep breath and grabs the heavy marble block. He jumps over the side of the boat and lets the stone drag him down. The weight pulls him rapidly to the sandy sea floor. This fast descent saves his precious breath for the actual harvest. He works quickly in the dim blue light to gather the natural sea sponges. When his lungs burn, he tugs the rope, and the crew pulls him up. The flat marble stone rests quietly on the seabed between dives. It is a brutal, exhausting way to make a living. The cold water presses in from all sides. The stone is his only anchor. Eventually, every citizen must make one final, dark journey. When a person dies, they are buried with a highly specific toll. The family gently places a single, small silver coin inside the mouth of the deceased. They tuck the tarnished coin, called an obol, right under the tongue. This money is not for the gods. It is a strict payment for Charon, the grim ferryman of the underworld. He requires a fee to row the soul across the dark river Styx. A flickering oil lamp casts a warm glow over the white linen burial cloth. The small silver coin rests quietly in the shadows. It is a final act of care from the living to the dead. Without this coin, the soul would wander the muddy banks forever. The heavy earth covers the grave, sealing the coin in the dark. The toll is paid, and the long, quiet rest finally begins. Our walk through ancient Greece is coming to an end. Wherever you've drifted to, you don't need to come back. There's nothing more to listen for tonight. Sleep well.